Hey, actor, welcome to Lydia Nicole's Acting Smarter Now podcast. Have you ever wanted to do voiceover animation? Well, today is your lucky day because I just finished interviewing Andrea Romano, who is the top leading voiceover animation director out there. Andrea is a prolific animated voice director for animation. She has done shows like Batman the series, Animaniacs, Avatar, The Last Airbender, and the list goes on and on and on. She's amazing, and she was so gracious to give us all these pearls of wisdom on what we need to do as actors when we're doing voiceover animation, from what to wear, how to stand in front of the mic. I mean, she just breaks it down. So get a piece of paper and a pen and get ready to take these notes because they are fire. So without further ado, let's go to the interview. What is it that you love about acting and the process?
I I love actors. I love their process. And I know it because I was an actor myself. And what I appreciate so much is an actor's willingness to expose silliness, personality, very personal emotions, to have access to that makes actors very sensitive people, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the worst. But they're willing to, if they're good actors, they're willing to do their work and trust a director to treat them with respect and kindness and give them an environment to create. And so that was always a big part of my job as a director, was giving actors an environment that they felt comfortable and safe in, where they could do all their work. Now, that also entails giving them as much information in advance as you can, in advance of them working. And so it has to do with, there are no question, there are some actors who are jerks. They have terrible personalities and they're jerks. But mostly, actors are kind and sensitive and aware of what other actors are going through. And that, in voiceover specifically, I learned there's an aspect of generosity in voice actors that I did not experience in other types of acting, whether it's stage or screen or TV or whatever, which is, if they go in for an audition, if a voiceover actor goes in for an audition and they are not the best person at it, and they know someone else who does it well, they'll suggest that other person, which is so incredibly decent and kind. And how often would you hear about that in on-camera work? It really doesn't happen that often, where people will say, "See, I don't do this so well, but Dee Baker does it way better." That's so kind.
Let me ask you a question in that. So would you have actors say that to you when they came in for the
Absolutely.
audition, to just say that to you? I
Absolutely.
love it.
People would come and say, "I'm very grateful for the audition. Of course, I will do the audition, and I'm delighted if I happen to book it. But do be sure, Andrea, to see X actor on this, because I've heard him do that voice and he's really good at it."
Can I tell you something real quick?
Yeah.
Because I'm an actor as well. And years ago, when I would go up for stuff that I knew I wasn't right for, I would tell the casting person, this, so and so would be so much better for this. And I got chewed out once by a casting director who told me, how dare I tell her how to do her job. So
Oh,
I love hearing what you just said. Go ahead.
thank you
I
for
just
that. Thank
wanted
you.
to insert
You
that.
know, every casting director is different, and on camera is different than voiceover, and stage is different. They're all very different. I happen to have been one of those casting directors who loves actors. I always wanted the actor to do their best work and to get the job. And the reason for that is, of course, in a very selfish way, it makes me look good. If the first person through the door is incredibly good, then I've really done a good job. If we could cast it with the first person, how fantastic. And I always try to, when I teach classes, I always try to tell my students, you have to imagine that the casting director wants you to get the gig. So even that casting director who chewed you out, to me, that expresses their insecurities. Also, don't forget that sometimes we are being given a directive as casting directors. Don't bring in the usual people for this. So whenever you have, 35 to 45-year-old moms, Latin, whatever, very intellect, whatever, all those things, sometimes they don't want to bring in the five gals that they always call in for that. They want to bring in somebody different and somebody new. And so that could have been that casting director's impetus for bringing you. And of course, nobody likes to be told that they didn't make the right choice. But I think she handled that poorly. That's my 2 cents. And I'm sorry. And I tell you, if I could apologize to every actor who's had a bad experience with casting directors, I would do so. I know that there are casting directors who are so angry at the world. Maybe it's because they wanted to be an actor. Maybe it's because they just don't like the work. Casting is, Lydia, in my impression, the least acknowledged, lowest paid, most difficult aspect of the entire industry. And it's crucial. Nobody can do good work unless you've got a good cast. It doesn't matter how brilliant the score is, it doesn't matter how good the script is. If it's not well cast, nothing else can build on it. And because of what we do in voiceover, we have the first shot, right? The actors and I are creating what will then be animated, and that will then take months and months and lots of people to make a complete and total project and final. But and so we've got to get it right at the beginning. We've got to get it right.
So what did you learn? Because your career is so astonishing. I mean,
Thank you.
you started as an actor, then you went into agency work, helping actors book work, and
Right,
then you went to casting. And
right,
then from casting, you started doing dialogue direction and then animation direction.
correct.
I want to know in the casting process, because when you came into casting, you already had the background of agency, so you already understood that actors are sensitive, they're intimidated easily,
Yep,
they wear their hearts on their sleeve. You being an actor understands the process of what an actor goes through from the time they get the call, you got this audition, to getting the audition, to leaving the audition.
right,
So
right.
you already have all this information. So when you went into casting, what did you learn as an actor that you
So
didn't
much.
know as an actor before that?
All those things you just said are accurate and were so helpful in my being sympathetic to actors and understanding everything from, I know you cannot possibly do an audition in Studio City and then make a gig in Culver City a half hour apart. By the time you get there, you'll be late, guaranteed. You'll be shaking. You'll be nervous. You can't possibly do your best work. So I always have been proud of the fact that all of my experience in the past has informed the next level of my career. So I always made sure, as a casting director, say I was casting for a series, so I'm casting all the main characters at the beginning. The copy goes out to all the agencies with breakdown. Ideally, there's a picture of a drawing of the character, there's a description of the character, and there's good copy. And so I try to get that to the actors as early as possible so they can work on it as long as they want to before they come in. So what I expect of the actor is that they've done their homework before they walk through the door. I've taken the time to get them. If there's reference materials they need, I try to get that. Okay, this is a similar character to Yosemite Sam. Here's a little clip of Yosemite Sam. Not an impression of him, but I want you to hear what he sounds like in case you're not familiar. It's that kind of Western guy, or any kind of material I can get. But what I would do, Lydia, is once the actor, I never like to keep an actor waiting. I was very good at keeping a schedule. If you had a 2:15 call time, if you didn't come through the door at 2:15 to read for me, I came out and explained to you that I was running 5 minutes behind or whatever. That's just the polite thing to do. But say, for example, back at Hanna-Barbera, when someone would call me from the front desk and say, Joe Schmo is here for their 10:15 audition, I would walk down to the lobby, greet the actor, walk them to the studio, set them up on the microphone with their copy, answer any questions they may have, and then go in to the booth, let them stay in the studio, and then start the audition process. So there was a one-on-one. It wasn't just me sitting behind a sheet of glass and a microphone and you having to cold walk in all by yourself. And I often liked to do some of the initial auditions with people in the room with me, meaning in the same room with me, producers, writers, animation directors. And I would explain to them the generosity of spirit they have to have. And I want to tell you a story. No, this wasn't a session I did with Lexi. An actor named Max Brooks. He's the son of Anne Bancroft and Mel Brooks. He's also a very talented writer. But he came in to do a job for me. This wasn't even an audition. And he was replacing someone who just didn't work out. Now, first of all, I hate ever replacing an actor. I will do everything. I asked them to stay after school. I would say, release all the other actors and have them stay and work them through, really trying to save the job for them. I never liked to replace them, but there was this one role just didn't work out. It was for the series called Batman Beyond, which was a young 17-year-old Batman. And the character was a classmate of the young Batman in his regular form. His name was Terry McGinnis, was the character's name. So Max is coming in to record a replacement voice. He sits in the studio. I record him back and forth, just him and I, as far as there were no other actors that day. The way that studio was situated, he had to walk through a little hallway from the booth to get in and then to get out of the building. So there was a period of time when he would be in like a dead zone where he couldn't hear us, we couldn't hear him. Finished the session, he was terrific. He's in that dead zone. Somebody asked the producer behind me, so what did you think of that release of that most recent Star Wars movie or whatever movie had just come out? Just as Max walks through the door, Bruce says, I hated it. I thought it was terrible. 3 months later, when I called for Max to come back because the character appeared again in another episode, he had his agent call me and said, no, the producer hated me. He said it was the worst. I said, what are you talking about? Finally, I put it together that Bruce was responding to a question about a movie he saw, and Max thought it was about his performance. I'm telling you, my heart broke for him, thinking that for 3 months, he was thinking, they hated me at Warner Brothers. They hated my performance. They thought it was the worst. And so my point of this is, in the audition process, when there's other people behind me, I explain to them, don't make, smell bad faces. Don't let the actor see anything negative from you. Smile. If you're going to give me a note about something you didn't like, do it with a smile on your face. Actors are so sensitive. Please don't let them get a bad vibe from you. Or I would ask the producers to leave the studio till I got the audition. Come back and listen. But and I'll tell you, I trained a lot of producers, writers, animation directors how to behave around actors, because, as I said, actors are so sensitive. But you know what? You hire actors because they are sensitive. That's why you don't hire a technician to do voices. You hire an actor. You want that sensitivity. If the character needs to cry, you want to make sure that actor can get there. If the character needs to rage, you want to make sure the actor can get there. And so that audition process of getting the actor comfortable was a big part of my sort of preliminary work. Once we got them rolling with the audition, then other things would happen. But getting them to feel comfortable, welcome, and prepared was a really important part of my job as a casting director.
I want to go back to when you were acting. You took acting at Fredonia, and then you went to Rutgers.
That's right.
And then from Rutgers, you went straight to Manhattan and you started auditioning while you were working at Capizio's, which I love.
That. You know all this.
I love Capizio's. First of all, I used to go there all the time. You brought back such memories.
Nice.
But the fact that you and that something I heard you say, how important it is to study with a lot of teachers. I agree.
Great.
I want to know, because you studied with William Esper, you studied with Uta Hagen. Give me a little bit of what you got from each teacher that you took away.
You bring up an excellent point, which is you cannot take too many good classes. And I hesitated and put that word good in quotes because There are an awful lot of people out there that are taking money for teaching that have no place being a teacher. They are not qualified. And I always suggest to students and to actors, do some research on these people. Look at their IMDb page. Find out how much work they have. Someone who's done one voiceover gig for animation cannot teach a voiceover class in animation. They have to have more experience. The other thing is, I studied with many, many different people. Every Fredonia's acting program was excellent in that it required you to study all the different aspects of stage production. So you had to study stage lighting, makeup, costume, building sets, everything. So you got a very large overview of the entire industry, which gives you nothing but respect for what everybody contributes. And that works with every field, whether it's animation, stage work, TV work. You should know what a gaffer does if you work on camera. You should know what a grip does. You should know all those things and appreciate those people. But my point is about acting classes is you're not going to agree 100% with everything any one teacher has. But I guarantee they're going to have something you can walk away with that's going to help you. Bill Esper, I was a part of the acting program at Rutgers, and it was the first year that they decided in their graduate program to hire professional people like Bill Esper, like Eileen Blumenthal, who was a critic for the Village Voice, a now defunct newspaper. I was her graduate assistant. And so Avery Brooks, the actor, was the speech and movement teacher. And so all these different people came in, and there was something you could take from each of them, and some of the things that I absolutely disagreed with. But there's value, and you can learn, and you gotta try. You got to try what they suggest before you dismiss it. You cannot dismiss it without giving it a shot. Because even though you may not agree with their technique, there still might be something you can glean from it and use for yourself. So, and especially for voiceover, I think a lot of people have the sense of it now because we all speak of it so often. Voiceover acting is mostly about the acting. It's not about just creating silly voices. If you're someone who can do 100 voices, and first of all, that's doubtful because 100 voices is a lot. But if you can do 100 voices, but you can't act, you're probably a lot of fun at a party, but I can't hire you. I need you to actually be able to act through those wonderful voices. And so acting is always the number one step. And I always suggest to people, and I've been teaching a couple of classes here and now, even though I'm retired. I teach every once in a while just to keep my hands in. I always tell them, take more classes. Take good classes. If you want to run the names by me that you're considering studying with, I'm happy to give you my response. If you can, audit the class. Usually there's a minimal fee, $25, $50 to sit. Watch how the teacher treats actors. Don't study with an abusive teacher. That's just, it's already hard enough to be an actor. You don't need the teachers to be abusive. And see, for example, if you're taking a voiceover class for animation, say specifically, how many times is each actor getting up to the microphone? How big is the class? Is it 25 people? You're probably not going to get up to the microphone very often. Is it 10 people? That's a better chance of getting in front of the microphone every class. And to also just see if you like the way the director or the teacher treats actors. Is it with respect? Is it, are you learning from the other actors who are working, in the same class? And that's always key. I know there are very valuable private classes where it's just you and a teacher, but there's so much to be learned from other people and what they have done on microphone. You're like, well, I never even thought about creating a voice that began with the sound of a door creaking. Well, I could start the voice there, and maybe that becomes an old lady. And just, things that you learn from other people. And I'm a big believer in school. I also think you can study too much. And that was why I ultimately left Rutgers, was because I was stuck in academia too long, and I hadn't had the chance to actually go out there and try my hand at this stuff. And so you don't want to just only be a student. You need to be out there auditioning as well when you're ready.
What did you learn from the Village Voice critic that
She was
you
great.
Worked under?
Eileen Blumenthal was her name, and she was just great. And she was a theater history professor, if you will. at Rutgers. And so I don't know if you yourself have studied theater history. It's a fascinating subject. I kind of majored in it. Once I decided that I probably was not going to make a living acting, but knowing that I wanted to be in the entertainment industry in some capacity, I still continued to take as many courses as I could. And theater history is such an interesting vantage point for civilization. For example, some of the earliest written word are the plays of Aeschylus. I mean, ancient Greek plays are some of the earliest examples we have of what was going on in the world at the time. And so, and you know, if you study about actors in theater history, we've seen this, where there was a period of time when actors were like one step above serfs, one step above slaves. They were dispensable. They were, if they got killed, it didn't make a big deal. They were absolutely entertainment, and we could care less about them as human beings. And then, you know, you look at that compared to now, where actors, working actors who work regularly, make a very good living, and then celebrities make a very good living. So I thought theater history, and that's what she instilled in me, was the love of theater history, which is learning about how things came to be, how some of the first plays were done on grass tennis courts. That's the first spaces they were done, outdoor daytime in France. And then, you know, everything from the Shakespearean plays done at places like the Old Globe, where the groundlings paid half a penny to sit on the ground or stand on the ground to watch plays, and just the whole way that the theater community has grown and changed. Theater history is what she um, encouraged me to study, which I just loved. I just loved.
I want to stay in the training for a minute, because when you were offered the job to work in voiceover, you actually went and took voiceover classes.
I did.
What were a couple of things that you learned from that you actually have continued to use to this day?
That's great. I because I knew so little about voiceover, so this would be around 1980, 1981. It was not very well known, this industry, this voiceover industry. And I was initially supposed to be a temp at an agency called Abrams Rubelov. Ultimately ended
A
up
big
staying there.
agency. Wait,
A
let's
very
stop.
large.
It was a huge voiceover agency, commercial voiceover agency. Okay, go ahead. Go
It was huge. It was really
ahead.
big. And so I started to work there, and I was a voiceover agent, Don Pitts, my mentor, one of my many mentors, and he was the head agent. He had the department, and then there was a gentleman who directed the auditions, and I was the assistant who would give the actors their call times for auditions, their call times for jobs, get the audition copy, all the different things that needed to be done. Excuse me. And I realized that I didn't know enough about it. And having been an actor, I thought, you know, let me see if this is something that I would enjoy doing, and also let me see what I can do to help the clients that I am representing. And so one of the clients at that, I don't even know if he was, yes, he was. He was a client of Abrams Rubelov. His name was M.G. Kelly, Machine Gun Kelly, and he was a DJ in L.A. And he taught a class, a workshop, and this tells you about how long ago it was and how things have changed. I think it was a 4 to 6 week workshop, evenings, 3 hours every time we met. And at the end of the workshop, you left with a demo tape. Now, at this time, those were reel-to-reel demo tapes, so we are talking a long time ago. And you'd go in and do a special session with him, and you'd record a bunch of different copies, sometimes just narration, sometimes animation, sometimes commercial, and he would edit together a demo for you with music and effects and the whole deal. What I learned in that was how many different types of voiceover there are. Everything from talking toys. You know, Chatty Cathy was a pull toy that spoke. And that was the voice of June Foray. She spoke and recorded that voice. There's certainly animation. There's commercials. There's radio stuff. There's point of purchase. So, you know, you go to a store and there's a big standee and you press a button and it talks to you. That's a voiceover gig. Talking watches, voiceover gig. Movie trailers, promos, teasers, bumpers, all these different things that were used for television viewing. And aside from, you know, animation voicing. And so he gave me, that class gave me a tremendous amount of information as to all the other things that were available. I also learned microphone technique, how not to pop on a microphone, right? How to know how far away to stand. And I actually developed my own theory about that for people who are having trouble with mic technique, which was think about the microphone as a human ear. You wouldn't get close to a microphone, to a human ear and shout into it. If you get close, you're quieter, right? If you're talking into a human ear. If you're going to have to shout, you back off. And that seems to help people get a better sense of the space around a microphone, how to use it. I also learned that in that class from MG Kelly, that there's much to be learned from your fellow students, much to be learned. What to do right, what to do wrong. Everything from page turning, right? When you're working on a script in an animation session, everybody's got a full paper script on their stand. You can't just pick that paper up and turn it and put it over there in the middle of the session because that will be recorded. So you have to learn how to slide the paper over. You don't turn it, you don't flip it, you just slide it and put it down to avoid that. And you do that when your microphone is not on, when someone else is speaking. So all those kinds of recording studio information that everybody needs, that lots of like celebrities or people who had not done voiceover before just didn't think of, didn't know. I remember working with an actor that I just loved working with, Eric Roberts, and he had never done
Oh.
voiceover for animation, and he would like do this on the lines and rub his legs, and I had to actually go out into the studio and tell him where to put his hands and not because and another really simple thing is overlapping. You can't overlap in animation because the track readers need each track separate so they know which character's mouth to animate open, right? We're doing the dialogue first, then comes the animation. If someone's going, ah, and the next guy goes, ah, ah, you have to make sure the one mouth goes, ah, and the other guy's goes, ah, ah, not overlapping, in which case the track reader can't tell whose mouth to open. So no overlapping. I learned that in those classes. I learned things like not wearing noisy clothing. That seems like such a simple, easy thing, but I can't tell you how many times I've had to ask an actor to remove their shirt. And Lydia, you should be able to remember this. Lexi probably won't know who the heck I'm talking about. But Carol Channing was working for me over at Disney, and she was wearing a beautiful starched white cotton blouse. Just looked stunning. But every time she moved, it went whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I said, does anybody have a t-shirt that we can give Miss Channing that she can wear for the recording? And nobody did. She goes, oh, darling. She unbuttons her blouse, hangs it on the end of the microphone stand, and records the entire session in her bra. It was so wild. I loved it so much. But darling, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But that seems like such a simple thing as wearing not noisy clothes or jewelry, jewelry that would make noise, or heavy cologne. Some people are very sensitive, and so we used to work back in the day, ensemble record, which was the entire group there together, all the actors there. And sometimes somebody's cologne would disturb someone so much allergy-wise that they had to actually leave the room. And we had to air out the studio after that actor left and let them come back in. So real simple things like that were taught in that class. And those are things that I brought with me all along, reminding my students when I started teaching. I also learned that you achieve so much more with a student if you treat them with respect and kindness. An actor is so sensitive that if you shut them down by saying no or wrong or don't do that, you've already put a wall up that's going to be very hard for the actor to either climb over or break through. Everything with kindness, enthusiasm, and encouragement. Again, actors are very sensitive. You want them to be sensitive. And so I developed a theory of, or kind of a way of life, of treating actors the way I wanted to be treated when I was trying to be an actor. And just don't ever do anything to an actor that I wouldn't want to have done to me when I was trying to do it. And that mostly is about respect.
I want to go back to Eric Roberts and the hand
Okay.
movement because I think that as actors, sometimes we don't know where to put our hands.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what is the technique that actors can use when they are doing voiceover
Right.
to keep their
Yeah.
hands still.
Right. The thing is, if you are wearing quiet clothes, uh, and first of all, I always suggest that it's better for breath control, it's better for energy to stand for a recording session rather than sit. If you sit, you're not really allowing the diaphragm to fully lower to allow that enormous chamber to fill with air, right? And so I always suggest people stand up. So if you're wearing not noisy clothes and you're standing, you should be able to gesture while you're acting. You should be able to act. You can be as Italian as you want and use your hands and speak this way, because it's really hard, for example, if you're doing a show like an action show like a Batman or a Superman or a Justice League, it's very hard to do the sound of throwing a punch. Now, this is the vocal sound, not the sound effect, but the vocal sound of throwing a punch as opposed to right? If you can do that move, you can get the sound to come out better. And so you don't have to keep your hands, on the arms of your chair. You can leave them comfortably in your lap, or you can act with them. Just be careful you don't have noisy jewelry or noisy clothes.
And for the clothing, what fabric would be a
Cotton,
good
cotton,
fabric?
not
Okay.
starched. Right. Like I know it's not dressy, but that's the joyous thing about voiceover. You can show up for a session in your pajamas. But t-shirts, t-shirts are cotton, not the ones with like that sort of plastic when they do an artwork and it's got a kind of a plastic. A plain t-shirt is a cotton t-shirt is the best kind of thing. They have them with long sleeves you can wear, of course, and you can always show up to a session dressed to the nines, and when it comes time to actually work, go off, change, put the t-shirt on, do the work, go back, change to a really cool outfit, and spend the rest of the day that way. But it's be careful of your shoes. Be careful you don't have squeaky shoes. I know that sounds silly, but squeaky shoes. Um, and of course, things that are loose fitting. You don't want to. I see girls sometimes in really tight jeans, and it's a fashion statement. And here's another thing, Lydia. I'm sure you can appreciate this too, being an actress. We are taught as women in America that beauty is a flat belly. And that is not the best physical shape for breathing. And so rather than holding this all in, we should think about letting the belly hang, opening this up. And then when you take that breath, you can really fill up better. But if you're holding your stomach in just to try to keep that flat belly look, then you're not giving yourself the air that you need to get through a line. People will get through a line and need to go in for a breath to finish it. You want to be able to get it all in there. So it's that attitude of American beauty, which is being, 5'7" and weigh 98 pounds and a flat belly. Bellies should be allowed to breathe. I studied with Kristen Linkletter.
Oh
Kristen
wow.
Linkletter, another one of those people who
Yeah.
I had the great good fortune to study with. She had the group called the Working Theater, I believe was the group. And she had an entire way of teaching breathing that I thought was excellent. It wasn't foolproof, but there was a lot about letting, and she had just had a baby. And so she was watching the baby breathe, and she used a lot of her technique from watching before anybody had said, suck in your belly, throw those shoulders back, suck in that belly. The baby, she just watched how the baby breathed and developed her technique about that and said, the babies let it hang out. We should let it hang out. And it all was a very interesting technique. Kristen Linkletter also is the mother of the director Richard Linkletter, who did Dazed and Confused. And that wonderful piece about the kid that he filmed him over like 10 years as the
Years.
kid
Yeah.
grew up. Fantastic. But she was terrific. I was very happy to study. And yet there was some stuff that she taught that I did not think was valuable for me. So I didn't use all of her technique.
And I love what you said, because it's giving women permission to be okay with how they are. I think we
Absolutely.
don't hear that enough. It's like we're told, be the best you can be, but then they put a lot of restrictions on that.
Absolutely.
And so to
Absolutely.
be able to say, be who you are,
That's
enjoy
it.
it,
That's
and
it.
just stand in it. Don't
Absolutely.
suck in your belly if
Right.
that's not who you are.
Right.
Just be.
And
be.
not just that, not just because that's not who you are. Release the muscles there because you need them to work in a different way. You need them to work to give you strength to push out a 10-second scream, a 10-second breath, whatever you need. But there's also that whole attitude of, well, it has to do with voiceover. It doesn't matter what you look like, and that's the joy of voiceover. And why so many people get into it, I think, because they will often, or they have the potential to be cast for voiceover for a character that they would possibly never be cast as on camera, right? For people who do
Hmm.
both. So, a girl who's well, let's say an older woman who's 45 years old. The first instinct isn't, okay, that's what I'm going to use for the voice of a 10-year-old boy. However, Nancy Cartwright, who's been doing the voice of Bart Simpson for the last, 35 years, absolutely. And that's one of those joyous things, Lydia, about women in voiceover for animation is we can do voices that are realistic sounding boy voices. And what happens to boys, real boys, although I love working with kids, is you get to that 10, 11, 12-year-old range and their voices change. I remember when I was working, I would get resumes from kids when I was doing casting for kids. There'd be like 10 kids who credited themselves with the voice of Charlie Brown because 10 different kids did the voice of Charlie Brown because as soon as
Wow.
they age out, they have to recast. What a hard casting that is. Thank God I didn't have to do that gig because it still has to sound like the original Charlie Brown, right?
Hmm.
But every year somebody new, the voice changes. And I'll tell you a really cool story. I found some paperwork many years ago about one of the first castings I did for Warner Brothers. It was for Tiny Toon Adventures, the first Steven Spielberg project I did. And I was looking at the SAG sign-in sheets. You just had to sign in, give your name, your age, and I would use them to put my notes on for the actor. And I noticed that two actors I had marked as the two best actors I read, but I couldn't hire either of them because they were literally at the point where I could hear their voice changing. I mean, it was changing like in the studio while they were auditioning for me. And it was Leo DiCaprio and Giovanni Ribisi. And they were
Wow.
probably 10 years old at the time, 12, maybe 10, 11, 12. But their
Wow.
voices, and I thought, these guys were such good actors, but I cannot hire them. But it was simply because their voices changed. So women do a lot of boy voices. And that's a big advantage. But you have to think about things when you're doing kid voice like that, about how kids breathe different and they'll breathe in a really weird place that we adults would never think of breathing in. We go for the phrases, they don't. And so that was one of the few advantages because for the most part, when I started working in voiceover for animation, I'd say 75 to 80% of the castings were for males. There were far fewer roles for women, except when it came to little boy voices. I always auditioned real kids and adult women, and we would pick the best voice. And if we had a series that we knew it was going to go on, we were confident. I think even for Tiny Toon Adventures, the initial purchase for that was for 65 episodes. So
Wow.
that's going to take at least 2.5 years to produce. Those kids whose voices were already changing were going to sound like men by the time we finished production. So I had to look at voices who either, and there's a couple of adult men like the Jason Marsdens, whose voices are naturally young. They will be able to sound like 12-year-old Scott Menville. He will sound like a kid. He's got to be 50 years old by now. He still sounds 12. But it's fabulous. It's given them, I mean, he's been the voice of Robin for a decade probably. And that's an advantage. That's terrific.
You as a woman has you've really done an amazing job and your career has taken off where I don't know that a lot of women have had that kind of trajectory that even you started as an actor, you got into theatrical agency, then went into casting, then went into directing at an early. I mean, you started directing when it was still early. It was, you had Hanna-Barbera. You didn't have many
No,
other studios doing animation in the way that you started doing it. And
right?
so what do you think kept you hitting all the marks and becoming so successful as a female director in that genre? Because you really, you are the one to beat. Man, woman,
Oh,
dog,
Janice,
child, you're the
thank
one.
you.
You're the one. I mean, you I as I was studying all that you've done, I was thinking acting, for me, in looking at you, just observing what you've done, I go, oh, it's acting. That she's been able to morph into so many different types of characters while she's been on this career. So I just want to hear it from you, how you've handled it, because you've had a stellar career in this business, for anybody, just being able to work continuously.
It was a lot of luck, being in the right place at the right time, and a lot of taking risks, because sometimes you have to take a risk as a creative person. And my family, I come from a very large family. I'm one of 8 kids. So part of my energy comes from that fact. I'm child number 6. There's only 2 younger than I. And so at the dinner table, to get attention, you had to, put yourself out there. And so I got very sort of comfortable demanding attention. And I don't mean that in pay attention to me. I just mean commanding attention. And my family all had a great sense of humor, and that helps a lot. I also was like a cheerleader. I know that sounds like a silly thing, but that actually helped in my career. I was a drum majorette. That helped in my career. But I have to give full credit to my number one mentor, Gordon Hunt, who was the director at Hanna-Barbera for years and years and years, and my dear, dear friend who's no longer with us, but left quite a legacy. He also had such great respect for actors, which was delightful. And he was not afraid to reach out to the acting community for people who had not done this work before. Gordon had been the casting director at the Mark Taper Forum for years. And so he knew an awful lot of actors from that. And he sat down with me one day and said, let's open this up to those actors. Let's look at the agency lists and start talking to the agents about people who have not yet done voiceover, but whom we know are good actors because we've seen them on stage, or we've seen them on TV, or we've seen them on film. So we have that benefit of actually knowing their work already. Microphone technique, studio stuff, I can teach in a very short period of time. Acting, I can't teach in a 4-hour session. I need them to come in as good actors. So Gordon encouraged me to reach out to other actors than the group of people who had been doing it up to that point.
You're also a very curious person.
I
It
am.
seems like that, that you got the job at Abrams, and you went and you took a voiceover class, and then you went to Hanna-Barbera, and you went to every department to find out
Right,
what
right,
everybody did. And to
right.
me, that is brilliant. It reminds me of Stella Adler. I studied with Stella for a
Oh,
while,
cool.
and and she was always talking about research, and you are a great example of somebody who's researching your environment, your immediate environment, not just, we're in the office, what do you do? What do I do? But you're really wanting to know what everybody in the whole company
Absolutely.
does.
Absolutely. And you're right. It is a curiosity. It also, and I think this came from Fredonia's mentality of, if you're going to be an actor, which is what I was studying when I was at Fredonia, you have to find out, what does the stage, let's say the lighting designer, how does he contribute? And what does he have to go through? And so that aspect of studying all the different parts of the people who create the production carried into animation. And I thought, oh my goodness, here I am in one of the finest studios. I was such a huge Hanna-Barbera fan as a kid. I was beyond thrilled when I got the gig there. And I joke about the fact that I was, sitting in my office, and, Yogi Bear walked in, and Huckleberry Hound, and, when I first spoke to Dawes Butler, when I first met him, and I knew, of course, who he was. And I told him that Huckleberry Hound was my personal favorite cartoon character, and he spoke to me as Huckleberry Hound, and I burst into tears. I just cried because I was transported back to being a little kid in front of the TV and watching Huckleberry Hound. And why Huckleberry Hound was my favorite, if you remember that cartoon, it was the first cartoon I was aware of where they broke the fourth wall. Huckleberry Hound spoke directly to camera, which to me meant he saw me through the TV sitting in my feety pajamas and spoke to me. And so it was an instant communication. So Dawes Butler was one of those unsung heroes, a brilliant voiceover actor. He just didn't have the same PR that Mel Blanc did. Equally as talented, I'm telling you. And these men were geniuses. When I started at Hanna-Barbera back in 84, I think I started at Hanna-Barbera, there was a handful of people who did almost all the work. Dawes Butler, Don Messick, Mel Blanc, June Foray, Howie Morris was in there. But shows like The Smurfs really opened it up because we needed, the Smurfs probably had, any given episode had 35 to 40 speaking roles.
Wow.
And so you needed to get a lot of people in. Even if you were getting actors to give you 3 voices per actor, you still needed a ton of actors to get that done. So we really started reaching out into the community. And I have to say, Ginny McSwain was the casting director when the Smurfs first were cast. She did an awesome job of finding remarkably versatile actors to come in and play that. And then the first show that I cast for Hanna-Barbera was The Snorks, which was essentially the undersea version of the Smurfs. And so it was the same thing. It was like 35 to 40 speaking roles every episode. And talk about getting thrown into the deep end of the pool. That was really an intense casting, but I loved it. I loved meeting all these actors, and I loved hearing what they could do. And I learned so much with Gordon Hunt as my teacher. And I learned so much from these actors as to what they were going through and what they were doing and how they came to be there and what they had already done. And you find out, like someone like Michael Bell, terrific voiceover actor. What's Michael Bell's claim to fame? He was the voice of Parquet. Do you remember the commercial campaign? Butter,
Parquet.
And he called it he bought himself a house out in Santa Barbara, and he called it Casa Residuales, because it was from the residuals from those commercials that he could buy a house in Santa Barbara. But this is when I started to realize that one could actually make a serious living if you were one of those actors who worked every day, multiple times a day. Some of these guys were doing 4-hour sessions with me in the morning, and then they'd go over to Ruby Spears or to Filmation and do another 4-hour session. Now, of course, because of the nature of the business, it's very rare to find an ensemble record anymore, which is so sad, because those were my favorite things, was having the whole cast together. But now a voiceover actor can do 5 and 6 sessions in a single day because they're recording from home. And then they come and they do their sessions, and they do their 5 lines of dialogue, and they click to another session, and they do their 20 lines of dialogue, and they click to another session. They do their commercial voiceover. I mean, it's just, the industry has changed so dramatically. But I do want to say that my girlfriend, Ginny McSwain, whom I adore, Ginny reached out to me when I was an agent at Special Artists. And you mentioned that Abrams Rubelov was a behemoth, a huge talent agency, probably 300 voiceover clients. And while I was there, I was headhunted to come over and start the voice division at Special Artists. And the reason they needed a voiceover agency, at the time, almost all voiceover actors were represented within their commercial talent agency. They were not represented theatrically for this, even though animation went under a theatrical contract, because commercials didn't. They were in the commercial department. So I got a phone call from Ginny McSwain saying, when I was at Special Artists, which is a boutique agency, a small agency, and those actors who were commercial clients there, on-camera commercial clients, wanted voiceover activity. Special Artists had no voiceover department. So these actors were leaving Special Artists to go to agencies that had voiceover department. They didn't want to lose their clients, Special Artists, so they hired a voiceover agent, which is what I did. I went there to start their division, which was terrific. I loved it. Very difficult. But I had a much smaller group of actors to deal with, and that was terrific. I could give them all much more activity. While I was there, I was dealing with Ginny McSwain over at Hanna-Barbera. She was the casting director there. Now, Ginny was initially an artist, a graphic artist. So she came into casting from a whole different side. And she was Gordon Hunt's casting director. She called me one day and said, Andrea, I'm going to go over to Marvel. This was during the explosion of Muppet Babies and all those shows. And she said, I'm going to be directing over there. And so there's going to be a new director over here. And I said, oh, Ginny, who is it going to be? You've been so kind to me. You always see my clients, even if you don't know them. She would do general auditions, and she'd see tons of my clients and get to know. It was fantastic. And she said, I don't know, Andrea, we're seeing a whole bunch of people. And the next day she called me up and she said, Andrea, would you be the least bit interested in coming to interview for this job? And in typical cartoon style, my phone was left spinning in the air as I beat feet over to Hanna-Barbera to be among the first to interview for the job. And they hired me the next day.
Wow.
Now, I'm the biggest cartoon fan. I loved cartoons so much that this was really a dream job for me. And it married so many of the things that I already knew. It married the agenting, it married studying, it married the agenting, it married the desire to be in the entertainment industry. And my first day there, Gordon said, I have to run out. I need you to record this one line of dialogue with the guy who plays Superman. I'll be back in an hour. Again, thrown into the deep end of the pool. Directed it and just went, ooh, that's fun. So there I am at Hanna-Barbera, casting, and it was a factory, can't deny it. We were cranking out cartoons like crazy. We probably recorded, if you break down a 5-day work week into 2 sessions a day, which is 9 to 1, 2 to 6, that's typically how sessions were booked. We probably recorded 8 to 10 sessions a week. So I had to start casting like crazy, get things ready for and prep the sessions and get them all and cast the incidentals and the guest stars and everything. And so as I'm doing this, I get a phone call from Tom Ruzicka is his name, and he was a creative director at Leo Burnett advertising agency, a big advertising agency in Los Angeles. And he said, Andrea, I've left the commercial industry and I've come over to Disney where we're forming Disney TV animation. It didn't exist at the time, Lydia. There was no TV division. There was a shorts division and there was theatrical, but there was no TV division. And he said, we're going to do a show called DuckTales. Woo! And it's, we're going to have 5 different directors audition to direct 65 episodes altogether. And we'll have you each direct 1 episode, and after the 5, we'll decide which one we want to direct the remainder of the shows. And so somebody came in and did the first episode, and they took 8 hours to do the first episode of DuckTales. And then I came in and did the second episode. It took me 4 hours to do it, including pickups. And they didn't even audition the other 3 directors. They just gave me the gig. Now, here's what's wild about that, Lydia, is talk about risk. I went to Hanna-Barbera and said, can I do this gig at Disney one afternoon a week, just the afternoon, just 2 to 6? And they said yes. So I was on staff at Hanna-Barbera casting, and 1 day a week I'd go off freelance and do DuckTales. Woo, gotta say it. Woo. And you'd never be able to do that today. It's an absolute conflict of interest. But they wanted me, and that was so delightful. DuckTales was such a sweet series, and then I started doing more and more work for Disney. I did, and this is a really interesting way of directing, Rescue Rangers, which was Chip and Dale. The way we directed that show was because both Chip and Dale and Gadget, third character, were all sped voices. Now remember what we're talking about. We're talking about now we're at about 1986, I think. We didn't have the ability to pitch voices electronically. All we could do is play with the speed of the tape because it was all reel to reel. That's all we could do. So I would rehearse the entire cast for Rescue Rangers. We'd all rehearse the whole thing. We'd record all the non-sped voices, go back and do any pickups that needed to be done for them, release that part of the cast, and keep Tress MacNeille and Corey Burton, the 2, Chip and Dale and Gadget, and I'm forgetting. It's not Gadget wasn't sped. It was a little bug, Zipper, and that was Corey Burton too. It was sped. So what we would then do is we would slow the tape down 50%, and the actors would have to act like this. So we'd record all of their lines like that, then bring the tape back up to speed, listen to the entire recording session of them to make sure we had clarity and that it didn't sound like this, and do pickups with that. So it was a very time-consuming, difficult thing. Now we can do it with a press of a button. We can speed the voice, we can pitch the voice. But it was a really interesting time of doing.
Who came up with that idea?
It was before me. When I
Oh,
came in, they were already doing that. I forget, there was a producer who had been a producer slash writer who had been directing the sessions, and it was just too much for her. And then she got pregnant, and it was all just too much. And so they reached out to me because I was already working for Disney on DuckTales. Woo! And thank you. And and so I did that. And then I did a bunch of Winnie the Pooh episodes, which was just joyous. And then now we're at about 1989. A bunch of the people I worked with together at Hanna-Barbera split off to form Warner Brothers TV Animation. Again, didn't exist. There was a shorts and a feature film company, but no regular TV animation. So at that point, then I had to leave Hanna-Barbera and become freelance. And talk about risk and fear. And oh my gosh, I'm leaving guaranteed vacation, guaranteed sick days, health insurance, everything that an on-staff job offers, the security. I had to give that all up. And like an actor, no matter how good you are at your job, when it wraps, you are as unemployed as the guy at McDonald's who got laid off. You are unemployed. I mean, you could be a brilliant director, a brilliant actor. When you're done, you're done. When that job wraps, you're done. Unless you have something lined up or you're doing multiple projects simultaneously, it's scary. And so, knock wood, I was very lucky. My problem was almost the opposite. I accepted too much work. 3 to 4 series at a time for a freelance director is a lot. There was one point when I was doing 11 projects simultaneously.
wow.
It was just crazy.
I want to go back to Gordon Hunt.
Please.
Was he your immediate boss when you
Yes.
got to Hanna-Barbera?
Yes.
Okay. So he was your immediate boss.
Yes.
And he entrusted you right away to do what was needed. It sounds like he didn't coddle you. He didn't
Not one bit.
It was like, you're all right. You're here. I got to go. Take care of it.
It was fabulous. Ginny had been very kind. Ginny McSwain had been very kind when I was still an agent and to be booking my clients. And I would say, can I come watch a session? Oh, yes, absolutely. So whenever it was possible, I would go and watch Gordon Hunt direct sessions with my clients in them. And sometimes they weren't even my clients in them. I just went to go see what was going on. And so Gordon already knew that I had seen how the work was done. I knew how to slate. I knew what was kind of required of a recording session. Because most people, if they've never been in one, they have no idea. There's a million ways you can do it. But Gordon's technique was brilliant. And so I knew Gordon. And when I interviewed with him for the job, we spoke a lot about my personal experience, my having studied acting, my having seen lots. He asked me, what was the first Broadway show you ever saw, Andrea? And I said, it was a piece that wasn't that well known. I thought it was stunning. It was called, God, now I'm going to forget the name of it. It was about the Dauphin. Good Lord. Anyhow, I went to see it on Broadway, and it was just stunning. The same weekend, I saw a bunch of Chorus Line and a bunch of other shows, and this was the show I liked the best. And I watched this small smile creep over Gordon's face, and I'm like, why are you smiling? He said, my brother directed that.
Wow.
The show that I loved. Oh my God. Anne Rankin, Joel Grey, the Dauphin. I'm going to think of it before we finish this. So Gordon and I had a rapport right away. And so, yes, he felt safe in going, she's seen me direct. She knows what to do. She's not going to beat up the actor. She's going to get what she needs. He told me to get 6 takes of one line. I got 6 different takes. Done. So yes, he trusted me right away. And we also had that theatrical background. He knows I had seen a lot of plays. He knew I was interested in stage work. And this is the other thing we discovered was actors who had stage experience understood the energy required for animation voice work better than actors who had only done TV and film. Because TV and film works so small, it captures the least little eyebrow raise. It captures the least little. Animation requires a slightly boosted energy. And so any actor who's worked on stage, even if they're mic'd on stage, there's an energy that's slightly larger than life. And that's what you need for animation voice acting. Sometimes way more than that if it's a really broad, cartoony animated project. But so that's why we felt comfortable hiring actors that he had known from the Mark Taper Forum, because they had stage experience and they understood that boosted energy.
Sidebar, Gordon Hunt is also the father of Helen Hunt. And
Correct.
Gordon Hunt also had wrote a great book for actors
Great
on
book.
auditioning. So
Correct.
if you're watching this and you are curious, pick up Gordon Hunt's book. It is wonderful. It was one of the first audition books that I've read back in the
It
80s.
got gems of information in there, absolute
Yes.
gems. He tells you everything that everything you didn't know about what that process is. So I'm glad to hear you mention that.
Just wanted to highlight him for a minute
Thank you.
because
Thank you.
he was such a force in Hollywood in the 80s, from the Mark Taper Forum to then going to Hanna-Barbera. He was a force.
And a great teacher.
I would say I would call him a quiet hero.
He had no ego. He really had no ego. He was not in it for himself. He was not in it to get credit for himself. He would be the first one to get somebody else in the spotlight, which makes him a terrific director. Because, and what was also so cool that I learned from him was, don't be afraid, as a director, don't be afraid to make a boob of yourself. Because in animation voice acting, when you sometimes feel so embarrassed to do something because they need you to do you're pulling yourself up a ladder, and the sound we need is and some people are like, I don't want to make that sound. That sounds like I'm pooping, or whatever. It's like, no, you need to make it. So Gordon would do it first so that the actor wouldn't be embarrassed to have to do it without somebody having already done it. And so, and there's also that thing of I never wanted to ask an actor to do something that I wasn't willing to do myself. And I learned that from Gordon as well, which is, I need you to make the sound of whatever, and I need you to make your cheeks really, blah, 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 and I need you to look like that. And then I would do it first, and then the actor didn't feel like a jerk doing it themselves. They felt like, okay, she already made a fool of herself. And that was a very important Gordon lesson, I thought. Thank you for speaking so highly of him.
Oh, yes.
I miss him.
Well, we don't give enough praise to people who have really, I think, who have really supported actors. And he was one who championed actors.
He
There's
did.
so many actors that are still around today that owe a lot to him. So I
Jonathan
just wanted
Banks.
to give
Jonathan
him
Banks
that.
was a student of Gordon's, and this was what was so cool. Gordon taught a class, I think it was only one afternoon a week, every week, for years, decades. And so I would go in every once in a while, I'd guest direct for him. I'd go in and speak and work with the actors. And from the very early stages, I would see someone like Jonathan Banks, who then had a hugely successful series and a major career, but he still would go to class every week and learn every week. And I thought that says a lot about Gordon's teaching, is that it never got stale, it never got tired, it never got repetitive to the point where it wasn't servicing the actors. And so many wonderful actors graduated his classes and took his classes and took it right till the very end. And he was a lovely human being, a kind, and that was a really important lesson too, is to learn to be kind to actors. Once you shut them down, you're not going to get a good performance from them. Once you make them feel bad, you're not going to get a good performance. I never understand why people would beat up actors. Are you going to do it that way? No, that's not good. No, don't do that. Those are terrible things to say to an actor. Whenever an actor would do a line reading, even if it was god awful terrible, the first words out of my mouth were always, good. Okay, it's always good first, and then moving forward, because it just doesn't serve any purpose to be unkind.
The
Ever.
praise sandwich.
Exactly.
You praise them. I learned that from my daughter's school when she was a little kid, that they would say, give a praise sandwich when you're giving correction. Make sure you start with something good and end with something good.
Oh, that's
so
lovely.
they could receive it.
That's
Yes,
lovely.
yes. And I'm hearing you talking about you finding your tribesmen, because Gordon was kind, because you were a kind person, and then you found another kind person. And I think that's the key in show business, is that we hear all the stories of the bad people, the crazy people, the power hungry people, but the truth is that there are so many good people, so many kind, caring people who want to see actors win. Um,
Absolutely.
that there, you
Absolutely.
know, we may have one story of the casting director who yelled at me, but I have so many stories of casting directors who just cheered me on. It was like, come on, you can do it, or
Right. Right.
and how much it- um going back to casting for a minute, because
Hmm.
I think that casting people do a magnificent job of bringing the right colors to the canvas. They know the actors, they love the actors, and they cheer the actors on. Even when the actor doesn't get that job, they're still they're big cheerleaders. And so I just wanted to take that moment to just say how important casting directors are, and how much as actors we need to see that casting directors want to hire you. Sometimes they can't hire you because you don't fit that canvas. It's
Right.
not because of your
Right.
talent, it's not
Right.
because of your ability.
No.
They're
Right.
looking for a certain color palette for that canvas,
That's
and
right.
unfortunately you're not it. and
Right.
and to let go of your ego and let go of your insecurities and understand that this is just the business,
That's
that
right.
when you come in for the audition, you have done your job.
Right.
You've
That's it.
done your
That's it.
job.
And I often suggest to people, and they, not everybody agrees with me, but I think it's worthwhile for actors to try to find out why they didn't get it. And it may just be a 30-second phone call or a text or an email or something, or asking the agent, can you find out if my audition was good? And can you find out for me why I didn't get that gig? Because that only teaches you and helps you learn. If there was, in fact, something you did wrong, you should find that out so that you can correct that for your next audition. And let's talk for a second, Lydia, about what a casting director's job is, because there's two aspects to it. One is the initial casting of the entire series, and then one is the episodic for each individual episode. The initial casting of the entire series for the main cast, our jobs as casting directors are to present options to the production for who could possibly work for that role. So let's say I have 5 main characters I have to cast. I will always submit 5 actors for that role. And then you have to think, okay, 5 for role A, 5 for role B. Okay, so actor A from that first group works well with actor B from this group, would fit with it. So then you have to start pairings, right? It's almost like a restaurant and the proper wine with the meal. Who works well with, and every once in a while, as I got more and more experienced and people trusted me more, um, I would take more of a chance and say, this isn't what you asked for specifically. Here's 4 submissions for what you asked for. And here's a 5th one that's kind of from left field, but it was so interesting. I thought it might be something you should hear. If you don't like it after 10 seconds, move on to the next audition and don't listen. But every once in a while, that would work. The other thing is, there's times when, of those 5 people I submitted, the producers can't, the producer, it also depends on how many people have a say, right? So there's the producers, there's the writers, there's the animation director. Sometimes if there's a commercial aspect to it, like Nintendo would have, like Pokemon was made by Nintendo would have a say as to who the voices were and stuff. So all those people, they don't always agree, right? So we have to get them to agree. And every once in a while they would turn to me and say, Andrea, we really like your second choice. Because I would submit them in my favorite order. I think this is the best one, blah, blah, blah. And I learned a lesson early on, which is don't submit anybody who you think shouldn't be considered, because that will ultimately get cast. You know it'll happen. There's this one guy who had this great voice but couldn't act well. This was very early on in my career. Couldn't act well but had a great voice, and damned if they didn't cast him. And he was impossible to direct because he just didn't understand acting terms. But the thing is, like they would say, we really like guy number 2. And I remember multiple times in my career saying, I'm staking my reputation on this. Guy number 1 is the guy. Yeah, but he's kind of an unknown. Now I know, but I'm telling you, he's the guy. And they would take the chance with me. And of course, you get to the first session and I'm sweating, going, oh, what if I was wrong? What if, I mean, I went through every bit of anxiety that every actor goes through with their auditions, with their first gig, everything. And sure enough, I almost without failure, after those first few mistakes I would make, I almost always was right about who was the right guy for the role. This comes from understanding acting, having watched cartoons for a really long time, having watched these actors in the lobby with the other actors. Are they pleasant? Are they communicating? Are they shutting down other actors? You want to make sure that you're going to create. I often made an analogy that casting was like putting together a party. Who's going to be fun together at this party? Who's all going to get along at this party? Who's going to bring something to the party? And if I were going to throw a party, which people would I want to be there? And so that was kind of the casting part of it. And then the party itself was the recording session. That was the actual party. All the hard work paid off in the recording sessions. That was the gift. That was the result of all the hard work.
Going back to your childhood, you got to see a lot of cartoons. Now you're an adult. You're meeting your childhood heroes. You're getting to also work on stuff that you saw as a kid. I was very impressed when I heard that you found all the actors who voiced the Jetsons and brought them back together. Can you tell that story? Because
Oh God, yes.
that's
I love
I
that story.
loved your Jetsons first of all. So
Me too. Thank you.
so
It
hearing
was
that
so
was so exciting.
it was so interesting because that was the first time that kind of thing happened where 26 years or something after that series was made, they decided they wanted it. And they'd only made, I think they made 26 episodes. They made 2 seasons of 13 episodes each of the original Jetsons. And then it kind of disappeared. And by that I mean Hanna-Barbera did not have those shows on tape in their files. They didn't have them. We had to go to, like, I think it was WOR New York that had them, and they were airing them. And that's where we got them. And one went missing. There's one that can't be found anywhere. And I think it's an episode where Jane gets a job. She leaves the family and goes and gets a job, and it somehow disappeared. Nobody could find the episode. But when they brought the project to Gordon and myself, the first thing I said to Gordon was, how do you feel about going back to the original actors? Shouldn't we at least try? And he said, oh, I love that idea. Let's go for it. So what I had to do was find out who that was, who those actors were. So I went to, this is such a wild story, Lydia. The archives at Hanna-Barbera were in a big warehouse on the Hanna-Barbera lot, which was over there in Cahuenga West. And it was run by this woman who was so tough and so cool. Her name was Jamie. And she smoked packs and packs of cigarettes a day. And she was one of the first professional female baseball players. She was terrific. But she had all the information of all the Hanna-Barbera productions in her head. Most of it was not documented. So I went to her and I told her what we were doing and that I wanted to get some reference material and I wanted to find out who were the actors. Not just for the main characters, but for the recurring characters, that would show up often. And so she comes back to me the next day with a little 3x5 card file with the shows, the 26 shows, with the cast all written in pencil. And come to find out, the first George Jetson for the first episode was originally Maury Amsterdam.
Wow.
And they replaced him before it aired with George O'Hanlon.
Wow.
So I'm working off these cards, and I'm finding the actors, and I'm tracking them down. Some of them still have agents. Dawes Butler was certainly still around and easy to find. Mel Blanc was still around and easy to find. George O'Hanlon, we found him by phone numbers, spoke to his wife, Nancy O'Hanlon. George had had a stroke 8 years earlier than my phone call to them and was blind, couldn't see, and was pretty much just, forgive me, waiting to die.
Wow.
And I spoke to his wife and I said, well, I'm not trying to put any pressure on you, but if he is the least bit interested, we'd love to bring him in, run him through some copy and see if it's something he can do. She called back a day or two later and said, I haven't seen him so excited in years. And the thing about the voice of George Jetson is it's not a cartoony character voice. It's the voice of the actor. So it's what we call a voice with character, right? Rather than a character voice. And so I wanted that. And so we already knew that we could speed it up a little bit because he was speaking quite slowly. And what we did, such an interesting technique, was Gordon would be in the studio with the actor. I would be in the booth with the engineer. And Gordon would feed the line to the actor, and the actor would repeat it back to him. And so sometimes the lines were very long, and we'd have to do it in pieces. And so it would have words like the food cycle, right? Things like that. And so we'd have to break some of those things up so George could feed them back. And then we'd have to edit it and make sure it sounded like a full line. Penny Singleton, the voice of Jane Jetson, Blondie from the Dagwood and Blondie movies, she had, since 26 years earlier, had gotten dentures. And they clicked. And they made noise. So Dawes Butler, a fabulous teacher, gave her private classes to teach her how not to click her dentures.
Wow.
So they all came in to work together. We were still trying to do ensemble records with the exception of George because of the technique we had to use to get him. But we did have him come for the first session. And they all got to see each other, having not seen each other for 20 plus years. And some of them we had to speed a little bit. Some of them we had to pitch a little bit. But we got the original cast back together. We made 41 episodes. Near the end of it, George was not doing well. He was not feeling well. And at this point, we were doing a feature film. And the feature film was such a good idea. It was lovely they were going to make a Jetsons feature film. But the producer, and I disagreed with him so vehemently on this point, he decided to replace Judy Jetson, the sweetest Janet Waldo, practically the only actor in the cast who still sounded exactly like her 17-year-old Judy Jetson used to sound. And he decided to replace her with Tiffany, the singer. And I asked to have my name taken off the credits as casting director because I thought it was such a terrible idea. So that was kind of a bad thing that happened in the movie. And then George started getting sicker and sicker, and we started to have to record him maybe in half-hour sessions was all he had the energy for. He comes in for a session one day late in the process, and I've set him up in the studio and got him all comfortable and put his headset on him, and Gordon is sitting down next to him, and George says, Andrea, come next to me. And I got real close to him. He goes, put your ear next to my ear. And so I did, and I could hear the blood flowing through his head. Whoosh, whoosh,
Wow.
with every heartbeat. And he said, this is what I'm dealing with. I have a hard time hearing Gordon because of this. Now, there's nothing we could do about that, right? And so I said, let's try to work. Let's see how it goes. And Gordon said, George, after about 15 minutes of trying, he said, George, it's not working today. Let's go home, feel better. Well, we have time. We can do this. We called his wife in from the office where she was waiting. She comes in. It's the strangest thing, Lydia. It's very hard to even tell this story. I'm still in the booth. They're in the studio. Nancy O'Hanlon is standing in front of George. Gordon is to the side. She says, honey, I'm going to take you home. We're going to come back another day. Suddenly, George's head pitches forward into her chest. I see this look pass between Gordon and Nancy. I instantly grabbed the phone and dialed 911. In 3 minutes, the paramedics were there. He had a massive stroke right there at Hanna-Barbera. I followed the ambulance over to the hospital. It was very close by. And sat there while the doctor explained to Nancy that he would never recover from this particular stroke, that he was essentially gone. They put him on life support so his family could come and say goodbye. So essentially, he died in the recording session. But I tell you the story because it's actually quite joyous. First of all, I know we extended this man's life by giving him a reason every week to get up, get dressed, go out to a recording session, and act. And he died doing what he loved. Absolutely loved it. And so, let us all go that way, doing what we loved and just gone. But it was, and I know that all those actors that worked on that session, all of them, it brought joy into their lives to do that session. They loved seeing each other. And it made me really happy to be a part of something so memorable in my youth. I remember the Flintstones, the Jetsons, all those wonderful cartoons.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm one of those crazy people for whom those repeating backgrounds gave comfort. When Yogi would run past the same cave opening 10 times. When Fred Flintstone would run past the same vase on the same table 10 times. When his little rock
Oh,
house was so big he
yes.
could run for like 20 minutes
Oh
and still
man.
not pass the same, or still pass the same thing. Fabulous. So the Jetsons was great fun. They did find other sound-alikes to do to finish up that movie, but for me, the bad smell existed since the time they replaced Janet Waldo. I called Janet myself. She was my client when I was an agent at Abrams Rubaloff. I still remember her phone number. I still have it in my mind. And I called her and just said, I hate this idea. It's not my idea. I'm having my name taken off the credits. I think I'm credited as assistant director or something. But I knew the hate mail that was going to come in, and it did. Truckloads of hate mail. Why on earth would you recast Janet Waldo? I didn't. I didn't want to. I thought it was a bad idea. But and the movie, you know, kind of tanked. I don't know how well it did, but it was. But still, the series was. I'm very, very proud to have been a part and very happy to have gotten all those actors back in. Howie Morris and John Stevenson and all the team of actors that worked at Hanna-Barbera regularly all came in. That was great.
Wow. So I want to talk about uh Kevin Conroy, Batman.
Right.
I looked him up and he went to Juilliard and he did theater, like a huge amount of theater. So why I'm bringing this up is you talked about how Gordon Hunt liked theater actors. And what I may be wrong, I may have taken it in wrong, but he did all the Batman
Correct.
cartoons,
Correct.
all of
Almost
them.
all. Almost all.
Oh,
They
okay,
did, I mean,
okay,
at a certain point, they did, when they started making some of the direct to home video movies, and they wanted to change the artistic style, the art style, they wanted also to change the voices. So some of
okay.
those we started using other Batman. I probably cast the voice of Batman 15 times. But Kevin
Wow,
was the go to guy. And even now, when I see a Batman script, it's his voice that I hear. It's Mark Hamill's voice as the Joker. It's Tim Daly as Superman. It's, you know, I hear those voices, yeah.
wow.
And yes, he was a Juilliard trained actor. And I'll tell you, when he came into audition, he came in at the end. And as you can imagine, such a valuable property. It's the first animated Batman, with the exception of Super Friends, that was done at Hanna-Barbera a million years before. It was a very cartoony version, Super Friends. Other than that, the only Batman that had been done in any form was the Adam West 1960s series, which was very broad and very cartoony, if you will.
Campy. It was very campy.
It was really campy, and I
Yeah,
loved it. I thought it was great.
yeah.
But they wanted to do The Dark Knight. They wanted the dark, like the comics, which was a very dark series. And so I had auditioned. I really sent it out to everybody. Audition all the actors that you want to. Send me only your 10 best. They all sent me 20 just for Batman. And so I probably listened to thousands of auditions for just the voice of Batman. Narrowed it down to, I think, like 250. Started doing callbacks. I think I called back maybe 100 guys that I wanted to work with to see how good they were following direction, if they could do the fight wall that we need them to do. And at this point, Bruce and I, Bruce Timm was the producer. Bruce and I, we got to the point where we heard about 5 actors that could do it. Now that's not a rave; they could do it. And so I asked my dear roommate, whom I'd known since Fredonia. We went to Fredonia together, and he was an agent at the Ann Wright Agency, an agency that doesn't even exist anymore, but it was a theatrical agency. And I said, can you think of any actors that I haven't read yet? And I showed him the list of all the people that I should read for this. He goes, you know, there's this great actor, Kevin Conroy, Juilliard-trained actor, theater actor, lots of soap opera experience, lots of on-camera experience, but he's got a beautiful voice. So we brought him in during the callback part of the process, so very late in the process. And he walked in having no voiceover experience yet. And I said, do you have any questions? And he said, you know, this seems to me to be Hamlet. Parents killed, father killed in front of him. Revenge, full of revenge. He started making all kinds of connections and analogies. I went, wow, this is a Juilliard trained actor. And how accurate that is, and what a great way to look at it. And so he opened his mouth. And at the time, we were making a clear distinction vocally between Batman and Bruce Wayne. And so we played Bruce Wayne kind of foppish, kind of light, kind of silly, wealthy boy, you know. And but Batman was the strong Batman. And Kevin had this very interesting mentality, as did Diedrich Bader later when he played him for another project, which was the real voice is Batman. The put-on voice is Bruce Wayne. Which I thought was a really interesting way of looking at it. Going, Batman is the touchstone. Batman is the voice that he would normally speak with. Bruce Wayne, he fabricates because he's got to put on this other persona. So Kevin opened his mouth and we absolutely fell in love with him. Bruce and I looked at each other like, oh my God, there it is. Last minute. I mean, really last minute. And he didn't ask the question that so many people do, and this is such a mistake for actors, which is I send out so much material to prep the actors for the audition. And then to have people walk in and say, so what are you looking for? Well, frankly, I'm looking for you to be really, really good so that we can cast you and I'll be done for the day. That's what I'm looking for. But what I'm looking for is all that stuff I sent you, all the character description, all the models I sent you, really good copy for you to work with. And so I think that's a mistake that actors do sometimes when they walk in and go, what are you looking for? The casting directors don't want to hear that. What they want is for you to do your job, to do your homework. And if you have questions, they should be asked before you come in for the callback. Ask those questions through your agent. I don't understand this note on the copy. I don't understand this. Get the information ahead of time so that when you walk in, you are ready to go. You could actually record a session at that point. You should be able to. So yes, Kevin, what I had to teach Kevin that was so interesting is all the fight walla. He knew nothing about how to throw a batarang, the sound of that, how to take a punch, how to make the difference between the sound of throwing a punch and taking a punch. And I created a system whereby, for me, I always said, if you add an H to the front of the effort, it sounds like you're performing the action. So say it's a kick, right? There's an H on the front of that. If you're taking the punch or taking the kick, put a vowel on the front of it. Ooh, oh. So to help differentiate so that everything doesn't sound like, so it just doesn't, they all have, and of course he'd have to throw the batarang. Diedrich Bader, who did the Brave and the Bold for me, Batman, has this wonderful, fabulous, laughable thing that happens when he does a, he instantly gets hiccups. So every time we would have to do him throwing a batarang, we'd have to save them for the end of the session because it would give him the hiccups. So it's kind of like, who was it? Mel Blanc. When he would chew on carrots for Bugs Bunny, the carrot juice going down his throat would change the sound of his voice. So he would do the carrot chews at the end of the sessions. So you learn what works for you and how to record to not mess yourself up. But so Kevin, I had to teach. So when I first, as I told you before, when I was trying not to embarrass actors by asking them to do something, I would do it first. So when I would ask Kevin to give his level at the beginning of a session, which is, giving the level is helping the engineer know how to mic you so that you don't distort, so they don't sound like you're off microphone. And so I'd say, okay, Kevin, say this line of dialogue, blah, 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 blah. Say this line of dialogue, blah, 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 blah. Okay, throw a batarang. Take a kick. Ooh. Do a strain. And he'd go, and so I do them all first for him so he wouldn't be embarrassed. And then, I absolutely fell in love with Kevin. I loved him still love him to this day. And so as he started doing this and he would give the voice sample, I would say, okay, so throw a punch, take a punch, do a strain. I know what it was, a keep alive groan. We always had these things called keep alive groans. In cartoons back then, we couldn't kill off characters. They had to be, so you'd knock out a bad guy, he'd hit the ground, and we had to do something like to prove he wasn't dead. Because the kids watching the shows, we didn't want them to think the kids were dead. So I'd have him do that at the end of setting his level. Give me a keep alive groan. And then I would say, and then say Andrea. And he would go, Andrea. In the sexiest voice ever. Okay, we can start. All right. And so for the every time I would ever record Kevin Conroy, We could not start until he had said my name, Andrea. And then the other actors started to do it too. So Ephraim Zimbalist would go, Andrea. And Bob Hastings would go, Andrea. And Mari Devon would say, Andrea.
Oh, that's great.
It was so great. It was so
That's
great.
great. So, when they get the script or when they get the materials for the audition,
Yeah.
and they go through it, is there anything that they should focus on? I've gotten the script, I've gotten the sample, I've gotten the video or the audio, whatever is attached to
Right.
what you're sending. Is there a specific way for an actor to take it all in and then go, okay, now I'm going to, because you made a point with Ken, how he saw Batman's voice as the true voice,
Right.
and then Bruce was the fun voice, but
Right.
it was Batman's voice. And
Right.
so when they're bringing in the character and they're bringing in that voice, whatever it
Yep.
is, that is there something, is there something tangible that you can give that they can anchor themselves in every time they are
Yes.
going
Yes.
for a character?
It's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. And there's multiple answers to it. One is, as I told you, for like a role as important as Batman, I heard so many auditions. And the copy, it wasn't a horribly long copy, but it was a good chunk of copy so the actors could sink their teeth into it. As I get into listening to audition number 1000, I'm not listening to the whole audition anymore. If I haven't heard what I need to hear in the first 10 to 15 seconds, I'm going to move on to the next guy. My point is, don't save your best stuff for the end of the copy. Make sure you hit me with your best shot right there at the beginning. And what that requires you to do is to answer a series of questions. And these are the questions. Where am I? Who am I talking to? How do I feel about that person or people? What just happened before I opened my mouth? Those questions impact the very beginning of the copy. And even if those decisions that you make, it may not be clear from the copy, but you have to make those decisions. Those things will be interesting. It will make the audition interesting. Even a wrong decision made will be more interesting than no decision made. I need to know that you made a choice. So, for example, I'm actually teaching a workshop later this month, so I have copy pulled. So, for example, the first piece of copy for Batman, the first line of dialogue, and this is exactly what Kevin had to read for this, was, "Sure, you have rights, but you forget I'm not a policeman." That's the line of dialogue, first line of dialogue. "Sure, you have rights, but you forget I'm not a policeman." So, and it does say parenthetically right before it, "to whining thug." So we already know who we're talking to. So he's talking to a whining thug. So where are we? We're in a warehouse. What just happened? I'm making this up. What just happened? I knocked out the thug. The thug is just coming to. He's complaining he's got rights. Sure, you have rights, right? That makes a difference. He just said, "Hey, I got rights here." Sure, you got rights. So that impacts that. But you forget, I'm not a policeman. So all that informs what you do. Without answering those questions, it could be, "Sure, you have rights, but you forget, I'm not a policeman." Well, that just lays there, doesn't it? It doesn't give any life to it. So you must ask questions. And good copy gives you a bunch of different chances to make different choices. The next line is, there's nothing wrong with you that I can't fix with my bare hands. Now that tells me it's to the Joker. So, Batman has this relationship with the Joker. There's a history there, right? So there's nothing wrong with you that I can't fix with my bare. There's things that you do by asking yourself questions. Where am I? What just happened? Who am I talking to? And how do I feel about that? There's a lot more questions that need to be asked as well, but those are really good ones. And you want to answer those, and you want to grab me right at the beginning of the audition. And so what I'm talking about when I say I didn't listen to the full audition if they didn't grab me is those thousands of auditions that came to me through agents. So I don't have the actor in front of me at that point. I only have the copy, the recording. So don't wait to do your best stuff later in the copy. The other thing is too, and people ask me about this, is how to slate if you're slating for yourself. Some people say, do I slate in the character voice or do I slate in my own voice? My answer to that is do what works best for you. If slating in Batman's voice gets you already there, so that when you dive into that first line of dialogue, you're already there, do that. If you don't need it, and you can just say, hi, this is Kevin Conroy as Batman, and you can dive in, that's fine too. So you have to make that choice yourself as to how you want to handle that. But the other thing is, you have to find something in the copy for the character that you're auditioning for that you love about this character. Even if he's a bad, bad, bad guy, you, the actor, have to find something that you love about this guy, or you can't play him, I don't think. You have to find something that you can relate to, that you can latch on to, that makes you want to play that character, because people will read for things they don't really want to play that character, and it comes across. We can tell that. So I suggest often to people, find something about the guy, the girl, the gal, the kid that you love. And when you're at home working through it, record yourself. You have 5 different versions. I mean, each of us have different versions, right? And you should walk into an audition with multiple versions, because you may come in to read for Lois Lane and you do a great audition, but the gal right in front of you did the exact same voice. You're the one that's going to have to change. They've already got that woman on tape. If they played that back for you, you go, oh man, that is just like what I'm doing. You need to have that second option. So always have 2 options for every character you're going in to read, I think. That's my opinion.
I want to go even a little more deeper.
Please.
So you're
Yep.
you're recording your stuff. You're recording the character. You're giving different voices. You want to give a couple of different takes, maybe even a couple of different voices per character. How should you practice that before you prepare for tape? Because sometimes actors are quick on the draw and they'll start recording, but they didn't take the time to rehearse it or practice
Right.
it
Right.
or kind of get a feel for it
Right.
beforehand.
Yeah.
What is your instruction on that end,
I
before
don't
they
think it's
hit the button?
right. I don't think it's a bad idea for them to record their rehearsal. I don't think they should use that as the take that they submit necessarily, but I don't think it's wrong for them to record it. It's just they shouldn't look at that as, okay, I'm going to dive in and record it and that's it. But I don't think it hurts if they've got 3 different versions to record the rehearsals, listen back to the 3 and go, oh, this one clearly is superior to the other 2. And then take that one and work that through. Answer those questions. Who am I talking to? Where am I? How do I feel about that? What just happened? And maybe you change. So you found the voice. Okay, this is the voice I like. I'm going to use that voice. The 3 different voices that I tried. I don't want to use the high one. I don't want to use the incredibly deep one. I want to use the one that's really comfortable in my range, right in the middle. Okay, now I'm talking to in this line someone I like, a friend. This is a friend. So the line is, we're not so different, you and I. That's the line. Now I'm talking to someone that I don't like at all. We're not so different, you and I. It's a different read, isn't it? Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Third version of that. I'm talking to my mom. We're not so different, you and I. Right? Everything, all those. So then that's maybe 3 more auditions that you'll record of your own, making different choices to those, answering those questions. And then you listen back and you go, I like that, I like that, I like that. And so, especially because we all have the ability now to record ourselves, we didn't always. I think recording isn't a bad idea, because unless you have somebody who's in your house with you that can give you feedback, it's just ethereal. It's just out there and not really just a memory, right? It's not recorded. So I don't think it's bad to record it, but don't. It's kind of like they used to always say when we were doing rehearsals on mic with the ensemble record. They used to say, we're going to record the rehearsal because everybody's going to be great. We're going to find some stuff, and almost never could it be used. Always people were laughing. There were overlaps, all kinds of stuff. but maybe there was something that happened that was organic and then that you want to go back and refer to. And that's what you're going to record when you're rehearsing your audition is, boy, didn't I do something on that first take that was really kind of a neat entrance? Oh, yeah. I chose to like, it's kind of like the knocking on the door exercise where you're on the other side of a door and you have to determine why you're going into that room, who's on the other side of the door. Is it an urgent knock? Is it a really quiet knock? Is it you don't want to wake the baby? All a million different knocks. Well, you have to come up with all those ideas for what's happening at the beginning of your copy as well. And so you want to be able to pull that from multiple takes that you recorded possibly. But I don't think it's a bad idea to record. Just rehearse it, work through it, ask yourself those questions for every paragraph of the copy. And then for something like a character like Batman and Bruce Wayne, which would read both those characters, listen to the two against each other. Does that make sense that that's the voice that would come out of that Batman to be Bruce Wayne, or is it just so silly and cartoony it would never fit together? So it's, do your research. Usually they'll tell you if you're doing a voice like Batman, they'll say, we are not looking for a Kevin Conroy sound-alike. Okay, good. What does Kevin Conroy sound like? Listen to a couple of Batman cartoons with Kevin. Okay, I don't want to go there. We want kind of Heath Ledger meets, some other Batman meets some, sometimes they'll give you a conglomeration. Well, listen to what Heath Ledger did. Do your homework. But originality is a big part for me in voice casting. I like people to do something that hasn't been done before. I don't want to hear you do your impression of Mark Hamill's Joker. I want to hear a new Joker. I want to hear something else that you created that's different. And if you need to, do both. If you need to do Mark Hamill's Joker, if you're looking for a sound-alike or something similar, do that, but also do the one that's your version. Submit that to your agent and ask your agent to choose which one they're going to send. Or maybe both they will send. You leave a lot in the hands of the agents. You have to, because now everybody records at home. Very few people go into agencies to do their auditions anymore. So they're being self-directed for the most part. And that's a lot to ask of an actor, to self-direct, to choose which one is the best. So it's good to have an agent or a booth director decide which one to send.
I have a couple of questions from actors, so I'm
Yes.
going to just give you what I've been asked.
Okay.
So the first one is, how do you come up with characters as an actor for auditions or just to have in your arsenal?
There's a million ways. First of all, ideally, you're given lots of information from the people doing the casting as to what that character is about. And so it may, like, you go, "What, boy, that's kind of like Christopher Walken in Deer Hunter." It's kind of that. And so you don't want to do a Christopher Walken impression, but maybe it causes a kind of hesitation that you normally might not have used. That's a Christopher Walken signature, but not a spot-on impression. So maybe you are reminded, and it could be you're reminded of your third grade teacher that none of us know. And, oh, that's a really good voice for a gravelly old cranky cop. That would be a really good voice for that. My science teacher in third grade was such a, gravelly old cranky guy. That's a good voice for that. Maybe I used to teach a class with a partner of mine, and we would have people come in and do 10 sound effects. And so they would do, the sound of a creaking door, or the sound of the wind blowing, or the sound of windshield wipers, or the sound of a rainbird. And we would take that and just find out where that voice was placed in the body. And then we would listen to it and go, okay, well, can we take that door creak and make it a witch? Can we get witchy with that? Can we? Or we would do, whatever. So sound effects sometimes can help you get into a voice. Accents, dialects, practice them. Don't do them if you're not good at them. If you can do them well, throw them in there. But nobody wants to hear a bad Cockney accent. Do a good one if you can do it. Unless the copy calls for it. It may say bad Cockney accent. Accents are good. Impressions. Impressions are a really good way to come up with a character of your own. And what I mean by that is, don't do a good impression. Don't do a great John Wayne. But find your own jumping off point from doing John Wayne. And I mean like women doing John Wayne impression. So Pilgrim or whatever. finding that and then taking that to create your cowgirl character. So kind of jumping off point for using somebody else's impression. Um, but that's such an enormous question. How do you come up with characters? Something should strike you from the copy, from the description, from the character design that speaks to you in some way. And that should be your jumping off point. And again, people from your past, relatives, actors that you know, celebrities, political people, you know, Bernie Sanders, great voice to start from. You know, all these different kind of political people who have real characteristics to their voices that you don't want to do an impression, but you want to kind of, unless you're an impressionist, but you want to get a jumping off point. Classes will teach you to do that. And that's the other thing that why I like group classes is you listen to somebody create a voice, you don't steal their voice. You don't steal the voice they created, but you use that as a jumping off point for a voice that you then alter and create and make your own. Classes.
Something that I loved when I was doing my homework on you is the fact that you have also done voices in some of the stuff you've done. I love that, first of all, that you, Andrea the actress, is still alive, is still
Thank
doing
you.
stuff. When did you get comfortable enough as a director, as a casting director, to go, "Hey, I could do one of these voices"?
I did it. There was a couple of reasons why I did it. I became a member of SAG because there was a cartoon made, a Pinky and the Brain episode, where they drew me in the cartoon, and they asked me to voice myself. And so, sure, easy peasy. And so I did it, and I got Taft-Hartley, and I became a member of SAG. And then there would come instances where, you know, the Screen Actors Guild essentially allows you 3 voices from one actor for one price. There's a 10% bump for that third voice, but still essentially 3 voices. So when I would pull, you know, do the mathematics and go, okay, actor A is going to do those 3, actor B is going to, now I have this one hanging out character that has one line of dialogue. And it was actually part of my negotiations for my own deal. Now, having been an agent, I negotiated for myself. So whenever I couldn't get, it's going to sound so mercenary, whenever I couldn't get enough money guaranteed for my direct casting and directing services, I would get them to agree in my contract to cast myself. But I would never do it taking a voice away from an actor. It would always be that one extra voice that didn't have anybody to do it. So some of the ones that I love to do were things like the back computer, to be able to, you know, danger, imminent, countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I love doing that stuff. And so they were, and whenever I thought that somebody could do it better than I would cast them instead of me. But what it did was, because I would get a session fee and then I would get residuals, which are so ridiculous at this point. They're like a check for 82 cents. It cost them as much to mail it to me and to process it as the check is. But it did compensate me so that I was fairly compensated for the casting and directing I did for the sessions. But I loved it. I loved doing it. I loved acting. And getting behind the microphone reminds you of what actors are going through. And so that never hurts. And whenever I would have a producer who I could tell clearly didn't understand what an actor was going through, I'd just get him to do it right. I'd put them behind the microphone. And they would just flop sweat. And they would come out going, that is way harder than I thought. Yeah, you got to know. It's not easy what these actors are doing. And so I remind myself every once in a while by getting behind the microphone myself. And that would remind me, oh yeah, even having done it for so many years, I still would get nervous and still get anxious and make sure that people would direct me to make sure that it was good. And if it wasn't good, I'd say, let me cast somebody and we'll get them in to do it and replace me. I don't mind. Perfectly fine. But yeah, I loved it. It was kind of a tribute, kind of a homage to Alfred Hitchcock,
I was just
which
going to
was,
say
you know,
that. I
putting
was just
himself
gonna,
in the, just a little something. I loved
just
it.
going to say that.
I liked it. It always made me happy.
You talked about negotiating for yourself because you had been an agent.
Right.
Did you do that for every job you got? You
You know,
negotiated for yourself?
at one point I thought I should have an agent. I should see if there's a difference if I have an agent negotiate to separate me from it so that I'm not actually the one. And he ultimately couldn't get me anything that I couldn't have gotten myself. And I had to pay him a 10% commission on every session. So I lost money in that deal. And then I stopped having anybody else do it. Just did it myself.
Another question on negotiation, and
Uh
this,
huh.
and I think this would be very advantageous for actors listening. Um, what is your philosophy when you are negotiating? Because I think actors a lot of times won't negotiate. They'll just take whatever is given. So, can you speak on the art of negotiating for yourself? We are so
Mm,
afraid that, oh, if I ask too much, then
right.
they'll leave.
Here's my thinking on that. For the most part, unless you're a celebrity, every new series that comes up that's casting is going to offer scale plus 10, and you should take it. You shouldn't negotiate the first shot out. If the series gets picked up, you should consult with your agent and find out if it's even an option to ask for a bump. And I'm not big on ask for the moon and take a little less. I'm big on having been an agent. Your agent should feel comfortable checking with the other agents who also have clients on that same show and find out if they're asking for a bump. Because if all the agents go in asking for a 10% bump for the second season because it's a successful show, then that's a strong way to go in. Everybody wants it. Now, they may say we simply don't have it. They may be jerks about it. How many times have we all heard that The Simpsons are recasting? And because they could make deals with the actors, you don't want to ask for too much. The thing about it is, there's a deal to be made. First, let's take The Simpsons for example. People would reach out to me and they go, Andrea, I'm going to read for Homer Simpson. Why are you reading for Homer Simpson? Oh, well, it went out to all the agents because their agents are asking for too much money. And I would always say, and this is, and again, this is my opinion. Other directors, agents, casting directors will have different opinions about this. My opinion is karma. And if you audition, okay, I've got to go back. There's going to be a deal made with Dan Castellaneta to do Homer Simpson. If you audition for that voice, somewhere down the line, you're going to have a series and someone's going to audition to replace you. I don't think you should audition for it. I think you should say, Dan Castellaneta is going to do that voice. And I think every actor should do that. Every actor should say, I will not. Now, that said, if an actor is no longer available or not interested or dies and you want to audition for the voice, fantastic. But if it's a negotiation, the reason that they're asking you to do a sound alike, I say don't do it. Now, I've had agents call me after I taught a class and told that to all the students, and agents call, what are you talking about, Andrea? I'm like, you're the agent. You and your client have a relationship. You should talk about it. I don't think. I think you're creating a situation where you'll be known as a scab, someone who will be willing to go in when someone is essentially striking because they think they deserve more money. And a show like The Simpsons, good God, they were making money hand over fist. They could afford to pay the actors more money. That show is such a performance-oriented show. You laugh because the actors are incredibly funny. That's what makes that show work so well. Very good scripts, of course, and the animation. I kind of liked the earlier animation when it wasn't so perfect as it is now, but still, the thing is, for a show that's as important as that, the company is sending a message to the actors they're negotiating with, saying we're going to do auditions. For a sound-alike for you. They're trying to force the actors' hands to make a deal. Well, if everybody says, no, we won't audition, they have to go back to the table and finish making a deal with the actors. There is a deal to be made with the existing actors. They worked really hard to get that gig in the first place. They've done it for season after season. Now they're in, season 35 or something obscene. I think stepping in and saying, I'll do their voice is just bad karma. I do. That's my 2 cents about replacing voices. Everybody will not feel that way. Some people will go, absolutely, I'll do Homer Simpson. Absolutely, I'll audition for Marge. I personally would never do it myself. I would not audition for it. And when I was an agent and when actors would come to me, when casting people would come to me with that, I would not suggest. I would present it to my actors, but I would suggest they didn't audition. And that, I think, is a really important distinction, Lydia, about agents. I don't think agents should turn down jobs for actors without telling the actor they've been approached. For example, it's one of those weird things. I've been in the industry for so long that I have a lot of friends who are celebrities. And I mean, genuinely friends. And so there was I think your daughter might have actually been working on the show at the time. They wanted a Carrie Elways type swashbuckler. And I said, it's actually written in the description of the script, Carrie Elways type swashbuckler. And I said to the casting people, I wasn't casting it, I was just directing. I said, did you offer it to Carrie Elways? And the agent came back with, he's not interested, it's not enough money. And I went back to the company and said, I would guess that Carrie has not been approached about this. I bet the agent turned it down because it wasn't an overscale offer. And I know Carrie would love to do this role. Please go back to that agent, tell him I'm directing, and I think that they should make the offer to Carrie. So they did, and he was delighted, and he came in, and he was fantastic. My point is they made a mistake, the agents. And I'm really opinionated about agents because I was one. Your job is to advise your client, not to turn down roles without telling the actor they've been offered it. It would have been perfectly fine for them to say, Carrie, you've been offered this role on this series. It's a scale offer. I don't think you should do it, but I want you to know about it. To which she still would have said, I want to do it. It's Andrea. I know her really well. I've told her I'll do anything. And it ultimately worked out. So it's really important, the relationship that you have with your agent. You have to be sure that you and the agent are on the same page as to what you're good for. And if I could spend a couple of minutes with you, Lydia, talking about this, because I think it's so important. You want to make sure of a few things with your agent. You want to make sure they like your work, that they know your work, they've come to see you in plays, they've watched whatever TV work you've done, they know your demo back to front. You want to make sure there aren't 5 other people in your same agency who do exactly the same thing you do. Because if I, as a casting director, am limiting the agent to only 5 submissions for each character, and there are 5 other actresses in your category, you may not even be submitted. So you want to make sure that you're getting the activity you deserve. You also want to make sure your agent thinks you are up there at the top of their list. You're the first, second, third person they're going to submit on this. You don't want to be also ran. You want to be the people they think of. And you want to make sure that if there's something that they want you to do differently, that you have that conversation. What am I doing wrong? Why am I not booking, agent? What feedback are you getting from the casting director that I'm not getting the gig? Sometimes it's just not your time. Sometimes for what your audition is excellent, it was up between you and the other guy got it. This is going to terrify actors. Sometimes it's actually the toss of a coin. These 2 actors are equally qualified to do the role. Who are we going to hire? Let's flip a coin. Okay, actor A is going to get it. Terrifying, I know. The other thing is, sometimes it comes down to that. Casting director, myself, is going, okay, there's these 2 actors. They're equally qualified. This guy's kind of a jerk. This guy's always pleasant to be around. Which one am I going to cast? I'm going to cast the guy that's good to be around. That's, again, if they're equal in talent. So make sure your agent thinks the world of you. So make sure you have good representation. Make sure they know what you can do. If you take a class and you learn how to do something that you never knew how to do before, and you don't tell your agent about it, you would be wrong to say to that agent, why don't you ever submit me on the old women roles? Well, I didn't know you did an old woman voice. Oh, gosh, yes, I learned how to do it in, Joe Schmo's workshop 2 years ago. Agents, think about this. Let's say, using round numbers, an agent represents 100 clients. In a perfect world, they are spending 1/100th of their working day working on every client, right? Every client has the right to expect that their agent is working for them every day. Well, how much time are you going to get if you get 1/100th of their day? You have to do your work. You have to give them the information they need. I learned how to do baby cries. I learned how to burp on cue. I can whistle on pitch, per whatever skills you've learned. I can now do a wonderful Russian accent. You must update your agent and make sure that they know everything that you can do, so that when they submit you on the right stuff and you don't get left out. So make sure you have that kind of relationship with your agent. If you're just hanging out there because you don't want to be agentless, I'm not sure that's the best thing to do. You may want to start looking for other representation and certainly see what else is out there.
What are some pointers you can give actors to getting closer to their agents without being a nuisance or without being disrespectful?
That's great.
Because
Excellent question.
you said make sure they know you're real, they know your work, front and back. A lot of actors are afraid to present because they don't want to bother the agent, but it's a relationship. So if you
That's
don't,
right.
if I don't call you
That's
and
right.
say, Andrea,
That's
I
right.
just did this fabulous workshop and I know these new techniques
Skills.
to do the
Right.
characters. How do you know? So yeah, so I would love to hear
Great
what you
question.
have to say.
Great question. The industry is different now than it used to be. Normally, that would have been a make a phone call, ask if you could have 15 minutes, bring them a delicious coffee and a delightful pastry, and take 15 minutes with them at their office. Now, so many people are working remotely that maybe what might be required is a quick 15-minute Zoom meeting. And you want to request it because it's certainly less scary to request that than to get the notice that you're being released from the agency because you're not booking. So maybe it's an email to your agent saying, um, I want to check in with you. We haven't had a chance to chat in a while. I have some new skills, or I have a new reel, or I want to know if you have any tips for me why I'm not booking. Can I get 15 minutes from you sometime next week? I don't think there's anything wrong with asking that. And especially because asking takes no time. You send an email, you send a text, whatever your typical communication with your agent is, and you ask that question. If they are not willing to spend that time with you, already something's wrong. Something's wrong with that relationship. That's not an equal relationship. If they're not willing to give you 15 minutes, because, they don't make any money unless you book a gig. So it behooves them to get you on the right track. And if you're not booking and you're not booking consistently for a period of time, they will release you. They will just not sign up a new contract with you. And so before that happens, find out, have something to say to them. Don't just randomly, I want to just talk to you. Make yourself a list of notes. I want to find out, are the auditions that I'm sending to you, the auditions that I'm doing in my home booth, are those being submitted to the casting person, or am I being eliminated before I even leave my agency? Of the 6 people that do what I do, am I number 1? Do I get out all the time, or do I need to do something more? When you hear and what this requires, and I think it's important, is the agents to listen to some of your past auditions, because what often happens is the booth director gets the auditions from all the actors, listens, determines which ones goes, and then forward them on. The agent isn't even involved. The agent is the one who said, audition these 5 people. Of our whole roster, audition those 5 people. So the booth director sends a copy out to the actor. The actor auditions at home, often without any direction, sends their auditions in. The booth director listens and decides which ones get sent. So asking for a meeting with the agent will require the agent to listen to some of your recent auditions, which is really good. You should have them hearing what you're doing. They should be able to tell you, you know what? The auditions that you're submitting are very 1990s cartoons. They're not 2024 cartoons. And they may suggest, and this is always a good idea for people who want to work in animation, watch what's working right now. Watch what's on the air. Watch cartoons. What's selling? What kind of cartoons are they making? They're typically not making Hanna-Barbera style cartoons like they used to years ago. They're not that broad. They're not that cartoony. Now, some are, but there's a lot of action shows. And of course, with video games, how huge video games are. If you have certain skills, like you could do 10 death screams, and by that I mean throat rippers, where you have to just, you are being stabbed a dozen times in this video game and you have to scream 10 different takes of 20 seconds of screaming. I learned how to do that, and I can do it without it hurting my voice. And I don't have to take the weekend to recover my voice. Your agent needs to know that, because video games have different skills. They're acquired differently. They're not done like a theatrical piece. They're recorded in pieces. And that kind of skill, being able to scream a death scream, is a very valuable skill for video games. I never had a hero voice before. I now have a hero voice. Your agent needs to know that. So what I suggest in general is, if you're dissatisfied with your activity from your agency, is take a workshop, a good workshop, hone up your characters, get them really good, and then request a meeting with your agent to go over those new things you learned, to play some of those quick takes. And I'm saying I think any agent worth their salt will give you 15 minutes. If you ask for an hour, you're not going to get it. But they can manage 15 minutes to talk about your career, because, again, they want you to get the gig. They want you to be one of those top fives. But you have to, the competition is so fierce, you have to take some control over your career. And by doing that, you have to make sure that your agent knows what you can do and is submitting you for the proper stuff.
How would I know what is a good workshop for voiceover animations? How would an actor be?
Great.
Because we talked about, I know what's a good acting teacher,
Right?
but as far as animation coaching or animation workshops, how would I know?
It's essentially the same process. Do your research on the teacher, find out what their credits are. Why did they think they're qualified to teach? Are they working voiceover actors? Fantastic. Study with them. Are they someone who could actually hire you? Are they a casting director? Are they a director? That's worthwhile investigating. I confess there were students of mine that I then hired because I learned what they could do in a 6-week workshop. They were really good and I could use them. Audit their classes. Pay them whatever fee it is to sit. You can't work, but just watch how they work with actors, how much work get done. Are they using contemporary materials? Are they giving you copy to read that's something that was just auditioned a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago? Are they pulling copy from a long time ago? Not to say that that copy from a long time ago isn't valid, but you also want to make sure that there's something contemporary that you're working on. Get a sense. I mean, it's kind of like searching for a doctor. If you can get references, find someone who took their class. Ask even within your own agency. Kathy Lizio, can you ask some of these other clients who they studied with and who they got really good results from? CESD, very good talent agency, one of the biggies. They reached out to me a couple of months ago, and they have been, within their own agency, hiring voice directors like myself and teachers to teach an online class just to their clients. And so I did one a couple of months ago. I'm doing another one in a couple of weeks. Only 10 students. But how brilliant is that? An agent who's going out to working professionals, not going to the, what is that book called? I still have one here. Voiceover Resource Guide. Not going there to find out the list of teachers, but rather the agency is going to people that they know are working in the industry or have worked in the industry. They've already done the screening for you. So maybe it takes a phone call to your agent going, why don't you guys do this? Why don't you guys reach out to casting directors and professional people to teach an online workshop just for your clients, groups of 10 at a time or whatever. I think that's a great idea. CESD did it first. There's no reason why every agency in town shouldn't be doing that, especially because now everybody has a home recording studio. Everybody's got a setup like you and I are talking on now where they can record and work and see. And, I can show you physical exercises and I can show you warm-up exercises and we can go through all kinds of stuff. But I think that's where you find your teachers, is through your agents too, who they think are good teachers. But get some references, get some other people who have studied with them. I want to tell you that I got some very positive feedback from people from that first class that I taught for CESD, where they've booked since that. And I think I'm a big believer that putting the energy out there, it comes back to you. It does. If you don't put energy out, it's not going to come back. And you may take a commercial voiceover workshop and suddenly you book an animation gig. Still, you put the energy out there. It came back in a different way, or vice versa. You took a commercial workshop and you booked an animation gig. How fantastic. It's just you put it out there, you got more confident, you got more skills, then you can move forward.
What do you think about the actor getting coached for a animation voiceover? If it's a big role, if you're going up for the next Batman, would it make sense for them to get coached on it so they could get some more? They could
Mm-hmm.
get a little bit more information as
Sure.
opposed to they're just working on it themselves.
Sure. If they have a good coach, if there's a good somebody they can call upon to help them, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great idea. Why not use everything you have available to you to try to get the role? The point is with things like that, say Batman, is you want that person to be someone who has inside information. Why is this different than the one you've done before? Why are you recasting it? What are you looking for that you haven't heard already? What can I do differently? So you want to make sure that person that you're going to work with is going to make the difference. That's crucial. But I don't see any reason why you shouldn't.
When you take on a directing job
Mm-hmm.
and you get the material, how do you break it down to start figuring out who the parts are for? Like
Yeah.
this is the character,
Right.
this is the character for this, and this is going to be
Right.
the character for this.
The first part of it, say it's a script that's already a show that's already in production. So we have the main cast set already. So I get a new script, and the first thing I do is I read through it and I write down all the main characters who are already cast and the actors that play them. So I've already got a list, and each of those actors, next to each of those actors' names are 3 lines. One of them is their existing character, and then 2 lines that are available for incidentals within the show that I can cast from within. And then I start mixing and matching. Okay, we have a maitre d' here. Okay, Bob could handle that. And then I've got a thug over here. Kevin could do the thug. And then I got, so then you break down the incidentals, using the financial aspect of it. How many voices can I get for free, essentially, by using the cast or there? But I have to also consider, can they do the voice, and can they make it sound different than the voice that they're doing for me already? And then you look at what you've got left over with. So I've got all my actors, my regular actors are doing 3 voices each, and now I've got left this guest villain, this bartender, and this taxi driver. Okay, who could do all 3 of these? And then I look at my enormous lists I have of actors who I want to work with. And they may be actors I worked with before, some I've never worked with, some that have been submitted by agents, I never had anything for them. And I look through that and I look, are any of them able to do all 3 of those voices that I need? And then if they're not, but this actor would be really good as the guest villain, this other guy could do the other 2. Sometimes I'll break it up that way. So you have to break down the script in a financial way, a logical way, and then the artistic way. Also, for shows like Batman, I had very savvy producers and writers who would have ideas of their own. We would really like to have Bud Cort come and play Toyman. We think he'd be odd and weird and wonderful. Love Bud Cort, absolutely. I make that offer to Bud. Now, Bud has an identifiable voice. I couldn't cast him as the bartender as well as Toyman. So he's a one shot, right? I have to get somebody else to cover those other 2. So you get to the point where you're like, and then here's one other thing that I would deal with, and not everybody does this, but I would. They're kind of called mercy gigs. It's kind of the gig that requires a little more than a pulse. It requires no massive acting skill. It's the guy that says, hey, you guys, we got to get out of here. That's his whole line. Everybody's all filled up. Everybody's got all the things. But so-and-so, their agent has called me and said, Joe Schmo needs one more gig to make his insurance. Absolutely, that's the guy I'll give the gig to. I have no problem with that. And I call them mercy gigs because, at one point somebody reached out to me and said, David L. Lander is going to lose his insurance if he can't get a gig in the next month. I'm like, oh my God, of course. Well, I find a gig for him, and I found a really good one, and it was a nice role, and he got the gig. But I don't ever like anybody to lose their SAG insurance. It's so important to have, and if it only requires one gig. Now, if they come to me and they say they need 3 gigs, I probably can't help them. But if there's one gig and I have those kinds of roles where I can just cast them, I'll just give them that way. It's just fair. It's the right thing to do. It's good karma.
How should actors approach voice directors that they either know or have come across, um, to put their work before them, to say, hey, Andrea, I do voiceovers. I would love the opportunity to be able to audition for you sometime. What is the best way for an actor to approach without being disrespectful, rude, or obnoxious?
It would be through the agent or through a manager if they have a manager. If they don't have an agent, but they are a member of SAG, see, this is a hard thing. When I was working, I always insisted that people who submitted to me were members of SAG, because even if they were good, I couldn't hire them if they weren't SAG. So say they're SAG, but they don't have an agent. I was someone that I was accessible. I made myself accessible to people so that they could. I have notebooks in my closet that you saw me close at the beginning, notebooks of every tape that was ever sent to me, every DVD, every CD that was ever sent. And what I would do is, when I had an extra minute, I would listen and make notes. And what those notes would be is, I would identify the voice, and I would say how I would cast it. And I would do it all while the tape was running, all while I was listening to it. If that voice was recorded so briefly, such a small amount of copy, that I couldn't identify it and how I would cast it, it's too short. I need to know that you can sustain the voice and that I can identify it. So, that would be a really good professor voice. That would be a really good villain voice. That would be a really good. So I have to be able to identify it. If you whisk it away too fast, some people go, ooh, here's my demo. It's 3 minutes long. There's 50 voices on it. That's not going to tell me anything. I need to know that you can act through the voice and that you can sustain the voice. And that takes 12 to 15 seconds. So if your demo only has 10 characters on it, but they're all really good and you can do them at the drop of a hat, that's great. So I would, if you can't find a way to get to the casting director, you're going to have to try to get through the agent and say to the agent, I want to try to open up the doors with Andrea Romano. I want to open up the doors with the casting people at Cartoon Network. I want to open up the doors wherever. And then that's the best way. That way there's kind of a pre-screening done, and the casting director can feel like, okay, the agent supports this actor enough that they want them. So I would have meetings with them oftentimes. I would have them submit their demo directly to me. I would make notes. I always expected the actor to call me back after they sent a demo to me so that I could give them the feedback that I wrote. Oftentimes people wouldn't, and I always found that so confusing. It's like, I barely had the time to listen to the demo. If you think I have the time to then track you down to give you your feedback, that's a mistake. You have to call me, but I'm happy to give you the feedback. I've made the notes. I can tell you what I thought you did right and what you did wrong. So I would say, try to get to the agent with an excellent demo. That's going to be the thing. An excellent demo that really represents what you do and what you can do quickly. Not overproduced, not a lot of music, not a lot of sound effects, not a lot of treated voices. I don't need to hear your voice pitched and sped and reverbed and echoed and this. I need to hear what you do as a voice actor. And I think demos should be about 3 minutes long. That's about all. And you should have a commercial demo and an animation demo. They shouldn't be the same one, I think. But again, every other casting director is going to have a different opinion about this. This is just how I like to work. And it should be your very best work that you could do all by yourself. One of my favorite demos I ever got, Lydia, was, the Dr. Seuss book, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish?
Yes.
Somebody read that book to me, and every time they turned like 2 or 3 pages, they would change the voice. So 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish, black fish, blue fish, old fish, new fish. This one has a little star. This one has a little car. My, what a lot of fish there are. New voice. Some are thin and some are fat. The fat one has a yellow hat. A whole different voice for the next 3 pages. No music, no sound effects, no treatment, just the actor a Dr. Seuss book, and 12 different voices. I thought it was one of the best demos I ever heard. Another one I heard that I loved was a guy walking into a psychiatrist's office. So he's the patient, he speaks to the receptionist, he goes in, he talks to the doctor has him lay down on the couch, and all his multiple personalities come out in the therapy session. No sound effects. I think maybe there was the closing door as he went into the doctor's office. That was it. No music. It's a mistake to have an overproduced demo tape. And that is your calling card. Just like your photo and resume is your calling card for on-camera work, your demo is your calling card for voiceover work, and it's got to be excellent. So make sure you spend the time and effort to do an excellent demo tape.
You made a point about getting it to the casting director
Yes.
so that they could screen it.
Yes.
Um, it just the lights went off for me because you, as the director, are seeking the casting director to assist you.
Well, more often than not, I was the casting director and the director. It's an unusual thing about voiceover for animation. More often than not, we cast for ourselves. That said, there are certain companies like Nickelodeon who had an existing casting department. They cast everything, and then they just hired freelance voice directors. But like at Warner Brothers, everything I did, almost everything I did, I cast for myself.
So some voiceover animation, there is a casting director in place.
Correct.
So that's who you should go to first.
Correct.
But if it is done where the director, the voice animation director, is doing both,
Yep.
then you submit to them. So
Yes.
your job as an actor is to find out, get the information first, so you don't step on anybody's toes.
Correct.
So if there is a casting director,
yep,
you do not want to disrespect them, because I think it's important that actors know that there is a protocol.
Absolutely.
To go to the casting director, if there is a casting director, go directly to the director if there's not, but to know the difference, do your homework. Come prepared, not just with the material, but who you're going to be dealing with.
Right. Correct. And that's the initial, the question simply is, who's the casting director, who's the director? So Andrea's doing both. Great. Or Meredith Lane is doing the casting, Andrea's doing the directing, or vice versa, or whatever. So very, very important. And you do want to do things professionally. That said, everybody's got stories. We've all read stories about, somebody getting in by, well, they sent this ridiculously large gift and blah, blah, blah. Those aren't the norms. Those things are unusual when that happens. And I was always very uncomfortable when people would send me gifts. And more often than not, I sent them back because and then they would say, look, I don't do this because I want the job. I appreciate your whatever. It's a very slippery slope there, because you as the casting director don't want them to be, called upon later when they go, did you cast that guy because he sent you a $50 gift certificate at, the store? You don't want to be on the other side of that. You want to be above board. That said, it wouldn't hurt if you have a friend who knows the director or the casting director well enough to reach out to them on your behalf. That's terrific. Hi, Andrea, it's Pat. I know that you're auditioning for blah, blah, blah. My friend so-and-so is auditioning for it. He's with this agency. He just wanted to make sure that you liked what he did, or, whatever. That kind of thing is A-okay. You don't want to step above, what's appropriate. And you know what's appropriate. You know what, you can feel it. And stepping over somebody to get what you want is never going to pay off. It may pay off in the short term, but in the long term, it's not going to pay off. Don't step over anybody to get what you want.
Okay. I think I've asked everything I want to know. Is there something that you feel you want to share that maybe I didn't ask? That
Sure. Yes. Great questions, by the way. All great. Animation is different than any other part of the industry in that if you are not having a good time making it, it will actually show in the finished product. So, and if you can't have fun making cartoons, somebody's doing something wrong. So don't forget to embrace the joy in it. Don't forget to have fun. We're all so lucky to work in this industry. There's 160 some odd thousand, 160,000 people in the Screen Actors Guild. Not nearly that many work all the time. If you are one of the lucky ones, be grateful, accept the work, do your homework, respect everybody else, but don't forget to have fun. It's an awfully wonderful career. It's, you think about it now, most people are in their pajamas at home in a recording studio they've built for themselves. It's easy as pie that way. It took a lot of work to get there, but the joy is there. So don't forget to have fun.
Wasn't that fire? I mean, that was great. Let me know in the comments what you think and share this episode with your friend. And get ready for this next interview with Michaela Robertson, where we're talking about why actors need to be podcasting. Check it out.